Canon's R6 Mark I and II are excellent full-frame mirrorless cameras. The larger body style offers the bigger battery pack, so you have a much longer shooting time, has in-body image stabilization, and that larger body translates to a DL housing, and that lets you use our USB-C bulkhead. Now, if you're not familiar with this bulkhead, it basically lets you either transfer data or charge your camera all through the housing. Check out the link here. We'll walk you through how to set it up and what the uses are, but it's an extremely useful advantage when you're shooting for a week long and you don't want to have to disassemble your system. Without further ado, let's go ahead and put this system together, and I'll show you how to do it and how I like to set it up. Alright, so first things first, before you start any assembly of any camera system, you're going to want to do yourself a favor and check your camera. Make sure that all of your settings are the way you want them to be, especially with an interface through the housing. Like you've heard me say many times before, the best way to get underwater photos that you like is to know your system and know it very well. So what I like to do is make sure you have a memory card installed, that it's formatted, that you can take photos to it, a fully charged battery. These are the things that you don't want to find out after you fully put your system together, that, oh, I need to put a battery and a card in. So after you've done that, let's turn our attention to the housing itself. You can set the housing down on its port opening, and you'll notice that there are 3 levers that will lock the back to the front, and they are lifted by releasing the lock and lifting up on the lever. Over the hook, and now you can take the back straight off. We'll set that aside for right now. And as I mentioned before, you have 2 different camera mounts, one for the Mark I, one for the Mark II. In this case, we're going to be using the Mark II, so I have the corresponding camera mount, and there is a 1/4-20 screw in the bottom of this camera mount that corresponds to the 1/4-20 female port on the camera. And align the screw to the port, and then basically use a flat-headed screwdriver to make sure that that camera mount is snug to the camera body. Any movement between these 2 pieces can and will translate to control misalignment, so make sure that it's on there relatively snug. From there, we'll turn our attention to the inside of the housing. Make sure your controls are free and out of the way when the camera slides in place. I like to pre-position my controls, get them out of the way. They're all direct drives, so they're very reliable. Take your hot shoe, make sure your lens release is in place. Now what we can do is we can take the manual hot shoe that comes with the housing. This is ground and trigger only, but it can be swapped out for a TTL hot shoe for a TTL system to shoot our TTL strobes. But for now, we'll just stick with the manual hot shoe. Take that and insert it into the top of your camera, making sure that it's pushed all the way forward. And then what you're going to want to do is align the camera mount with the base inside of the housing, like so. Drop down into place, position your cord, and then you're going to want to make sure that your direct drive controls all correspond to the controls of your camera. At this point, we can put the back on. Now, if you look at the back, you'll notice that this O-ring follows an outside perimeter at all times. It'll never take an inside turn. This is useful because that O-ring doesn't want to fall out of an inside turn. It'll always follow the outside perimeter. Furthermore, this back is completely clear, so we can see the O-ring as well as the camera through the back. So when we put this back onto the front, you'll actually see that O-ring compress, and you know that it's sealed. So because it is a compression seal, that means you do not leave lubricant on this particular O-ring. That being said, you do want to make sure that it is clean and free of debris, and the same thing for the sealing surface of the front. Usually running your finger across it lets you feel things beyond seeing them. Take the back, align it onto the front, like so, and then take each of the lid snaps and place them over the hook of the back. Simultaneously press down on the 2 left and right, and then finally the top. You can pull up on them to make sure that the lock was engaged and that they won't open on its own. And then you can visually confirm that your sealing surface and your O-ring actually got compressed when you put the back on. From there, I like to take the housing, put it on its bottom here, and I'm going to go ahead and take the shutter lever and the back button lever off, and I'm going to put an extension between that lever and the housing. What that's going to do is it's going to make those 2 levers reach out to my hand when I put the dual train handle on. So in order to do that, you'll loosen the 2 set screws in both levers, and remove them. Okay, once you have the levers removed, we're going to put on the extensions. Now you can put these extensions directly onto the housing and then put the levers on, but what I like to do is I like to put the levers on and then put the assembly onto the housing. I'm going to make note of where that set screw is, where I want my lever to be. Approximately, you'll notice that there's an octagonal shape that corresponds, and I'm basically going to roughly align it, and then I'm going to tighten the lever down to the extension, making sure you tighten down both set screws, and that the set screw of the extension is not protruding to the inside. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing for the back button. That will let you do back button focus very easily. Again, going to orient so I can easily access the set screw of the extension, and then my back button focus will be roughly where I want it to be. And then I will tighten down, again, both set screws of the lever. Now, when I go to put the extension and the lever assembly onto the housing, that set screw is easily accessed at the top. Same thing for the shutter lever. Now that we have the extensions on, we'll easily be able to access both levers when we use the dual train handle system. So let's go ahead and get that put on there. So I'm going to go ahead and take the housing and flip it over. When I grab the dual train handle, notice there's buttons for the quick release arms if you're using strobes. We want those to face me as the user. And then basically I'm going to align the small opening of the teardrop. I'm going to take a flat washer, insulating washer over the screw, both screws. I'm going to get that screw started into the foot of the housing, the mount. Same thing on the other side. Best not to tighten these down until you get them both started. And using a flat-headed screwdriver, we're going to snug both of those up so that they're nice and tight. Now, as you can see, both of those levers are very easily accessed without me having to strain my hand to reach for them. And that is as simple as getting the camera installed into the housing. Now it's a matter of putting a port on, and the port that you choose is going to be dependent upon the lens that you choose. So we accommodate many different lenses. Check out the port chart for this housing. We'll link to it in the description below. In this particular case, we're going to use the 10-20. So let's walk through how to put the 10-20 gear sleeve together and the port. Today, I'm going to be using the RF 10-20mm lens from Canon. This is a very wide zoom lens, so I'm going to use the large dome port and 28mm extension. And in order to accommodate this lens and zoom it, I'll need this gear sleeve. And in order to install all of this, what you're going to need to do is take the housing and you're going to remove the retaining ring. This is the same retaining ring that was holding the port cover in place. Preemptively remove the body cap. Keep that, spare parts. Take the ring, simply drop it down until it sits on the shelf with the tabs facing away from the camera body, and we're going to replace the retaining ring. Drop that into place and then thread it down. There's no need to over tighten this. Just make sure it bottoms out. Now what you're going to want to do is take the back cap off of the lens. Check to make sure that your switches are set in the position that you want. I recommend autofocus and image stabilization being on. And then what you're going to want to do in this case is line the red dot of the lens with the red dot of the camera. And you're going to roughly position the pads so that they don't interface with any of the protrusions on the side of the lens. And then line those two up. And then what you're going to do is slide the lens through the gear sleeve and pads. You'll feel the friction fit. And then feel for the bayonet, and then twist that on just like you would before until you hear it click. I like to take this opportunity to turn the drive gear of the zoom and make sure that I am actually zooming the lens. In this particular case, you're going to have the camera on since you really can't see that. But in this case, we are actually zooming the lens. And now all we have to do is put a port over it. As mentioned before, we have the 28mm extension. We're going to take a little bit of the Ikelite lube between our finger and thumb, and you're going to apply that lube, a very small film, to the O-ring of the extension, and feel for any debris or anything that might compromise the seal, and visually inspect to make sure you don't have any hair. Take the opportunity to make sure that the 3 thumb screws are backed out and free of the inside diameter. Check to make sure that the sealing surface is also clean and free of debris. Let's turn our attention to the port itself, and we're basically going to do the exact same thing. Make sure that the 3 thumb screws are unscrewed so that they're not protruding the inside, and check the sealing surface as well. You'll notice that when you look at the full dome port, that one of the shades corresponds to one of the thumb screws. That is what we're going to have at the very top of the housing with the noon position. So I'm going to align that thumb screw with the thumb screw of the extension, which corresponds to the pocket of the extension. That thumb screw is going to go into that pocket. Press down into place, and then all you're going to want to do is hand tighten the 3 thumb screws of the port. The seal occurred when we put the 2 pieces together, so there's no need to use a tool here. The thumb screws are basically just keeping this retained and from pulling off. Now, since we've already unscrewed the 3 thumb screws of the extension and they're not protruding to the inside, we've checked the sealing surface, and now we've made note of which one of the thumb screws corresponds to the shade itself. In this case, this one corresponds to the shade, so that'll go at the top. If we look at the port mount of the housing, you have the 3 pockets, and that will accommodate the 3 thumb screws. Now before we put that on there, we're going to do the same thing we did before. You're taking a little bit of the Ikelite lube, and you're going to make sure that there's a small film applied to reduce the friction on the O-ring of the port mount itself, again feeling for any debris, visually checking for any hairs that might be there. Take your port, make sure it's clean, and then line up that top thumb screw with the pocket. Place down like so, and then tighten the 3 thumb screws. At this point, we've accommodated the 10 to 20. We have the large dome port. Now we can accessorize the housing even further if we want to. Let's say we don't have an arm system with strobes. Let's say we're shooting video and we really want to trim this out. Well, what we can do is we can add the trim weight and extension to it. Check out the video on that here. Furthermore, we have a full DL system with the R6 Mark II. You can use the USB-C bulkhead, which I highly recommend. If you add that, then you can offload images from your housing. You can charge your camera, all without having to disassemble anything. Check out the video to that here. But beyond that, all we need to do to get in the water is hop in. It's good to go. But one more thing before we go. We're going to create a vacuum on the housing. Now, the housing comes with a vacuum port pre-installed. So all you have to do is get the hand pump. We can evacuate the air from inside the housing. This does a couple of things. One, it makes sure we don't forget any O-rings. It lets us check to make sure that it has a waterproof integrity. If air isn't getting into the housing, that means water won't get into the housing. Also, creating the vacuum inside basically reinforces all of the closing mechanisms. So if you find yourself in rough surf, all of these components are being sucked back together, and it really makes it for a strong bulletproof style system. So in order to create a vacuum, all we have to do is push the release button on the valve, and it'll take the cap out. We replace that cap with the barbed end of the vacuum pump. And from there, it's as simple as pumping the pump until you reach a vacuum on the gauge. Now, the number that you choose here is not what's critical. What is critical is that that needle doesn't move. Once you've reached a number, I suggest going to 10 or 15. But again, the number that you choose is not the most important part. Watch the needle, make sure that it doesn't drop down. Now, in order to make sure that we've isolated the housing completely, what I like to do is I like to create a vacuum. I will release the pump and put the cap back in. Now, if you can get away with doing this overnight, even better, but 15-20 minutes, let the housing sit, come back later, reinsert the barb of the pump, and it will jump right back to the vacuum that you created. Another thing that I recommend doing that we get a lot is people that will release the vacuum before they go diving. Now, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to keep it under a vacuum when you get in the water. Again, this is completely reinforced. It brings all the pieces, it sucks them all together, and that makes it a very robust system. So if you have any questions about this system, the vacuum system, the USB-C system, anything that I mentioned before, shoot us a comment down below or shoot us an email to ikelite@ikelite.com.